I don't have any letters I have to read in today.
One of the sheets I gave you was the public comment. Christina, we have an agenda coordinator. She started doing them like this. So she takes the agenda and she copies it in order. And I think that's the only one.
Okay. So I will have to read this.
So you'll have to read that one, but that's...
The problem is it's noise.
I haven't read it, but I think it's not relevant. It's not pertaining to the AR issues.
So I'm going to have to say that in the public comment that they need to talk about mobility amongst themselves. It's just that people will duck out.
This is for 1 minute.
Just for 6 grade, which is a final shouldn't give
I'll hold your hand. Okay, that's cool.
Just saves on the position. Yeah, that would be scary. Laura, Fillmore, are you all? Thank you. Are we recording? What's that?
Everything is fine.
Cool. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the September 22nd BAR Small Meeting. My name is Glenn Gardner. I'm the chair of the meeting today. With me are fellow board members Fillmore Wilson, Julia Martin, Eddie Fava, and Laura Altman. Our city staff present today include Frankie Pinto and Travis Galley, who is our BAR enforcement officer. The order of the meeting, for those who have not attended before, goes like this for each item on the agenda. First, there's an introduction overview by the city staff to tell you about the details of the project. Following that, the applicant is invited to give their presentation of their request, and that should be a group of both the architect, designers, and anyone who is an owner or integrally involved with the project would speak underneath the applicant's time period of 10 minutes. Following the applicant's presentation, we have a period of public comment for members of the public and the preservation community to speak in favor or against. Following that, the city staff will make their comments and recommendations, and then the applicant has an opportunity to clarify anything that may have been misrepresented during the other presentations. After that clarification period, we go into board discussion, at which point it is a board-only discussion, and the applicant is only allowed to speak if they're asked a question of the board. The following items tonight have been withdrawn. Number 23 Ann Street will not be heard and may be heard at a different time. So keep your eye on the agenda if that is what you were here for tonight. If there are any students present, we're glad to have you. Yes, sir.
I was contacted and told that there was an issue with the application and that would like to be withdrawn.
No, but that's really up to nobody contacted me. I was the one that,
Hey. Hold on 1 second.
So while Frankie sorts that out, if there are any students here, we're happy to have you. If you need anything signed or approved saying that you were here, please see Travis over here on the side, and he can give you either a stamp or a signature or whatever you may need. Please make sure your phones are turned off or to silent. And final comment is to please make sure that all discussion is related to architecture. We unfortunately cannot solve parking, flooding, noise, and other issues about life, but we will gladly talk about the architecture and the quality of what is being presented before us. So we'll give Frankie 1 second to check on 23 Ann Street, and then we'll move forward. We are live feeding on, I think we are on the city's YouTube channel, so if anyone needs to reference the meeting later, this is recorded and available online.
Edward Rawl said that there was an issue with your lease and that had to be resolved before it could go before the board.
I don't know who that is, and I think we're the applicants, we didn't withdraw the application. We'd like to move forward with our presentation. And, yeah, I'm the applicant.
I was told he was on the board for the building.
He's on the board of the Children's Museum?
Yes.
That's correct. There's no issue with our lease that we know of. We haven't gotten formal approval from the Children's Museum yet, so we'd like to get it approved at the city level first. We're not going to obviously paint anything on the side of the building without their approval, but we'd like to get it approved here. That's a start.
Yeah, but if I have the Children's Museum telling me that they haven't approved it yet, then the board wouldn't be able to hear it yet.
The Children's Museum hasn't formally approved yet. I've gotten verbal approval from them.
I'll say as chair in the past, if the applicant is not the owner of the property needs to submit a letter in support of the application.
Well, in this case, the city is
The
the
city
owner.
owns the property.
Right, and do we have a letter from the city? And the city is not the applicant? Then I'm going to move, we defer this for, it could easily come to the next board meeting, but I think the owner needs to be in support of the application. And I'm sorry if that's a hardship, but in the past, that's how we have treated things. Otherwise, I could submit to paint your house yellow.
That's a little confusing since the city owns the building,
Yes, sir.
and the city knew that the application was filed with the owner being the city of Charleston.
But a representative, I'm sorry, I don't know that we have the authority to hear the application.
So it's money, so.
Yes, and when we were notified, we posted on our notes that that fee would be transferred to the meeting that it would be appearing at. I was told that this was to appear at the last meeting in October.
How do you inform us of that?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I have the letter right here saying today.
And so who are you representing, sir?
23 Ann Street Restaurant LLC. We're Hazel Bodega runs the restaurant across the Street Promenade from Children's Museum. We've been in discussions with them for months.
Now I understand.
Bill Schuler.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I am going to make a motion as a chair that we must have approval of the owner of the building to propose work on the building.
So since we have the Children's Museum telling us that they are requesting it being deferred, we would need their confirmation.
Even for conceptual.
Yes.
I think we just have to keep that clean and legal. I'm sorry. But if a letter can be quickly provided, even with an email and letterhead from the city, this can be on the next agenda.
Okay.
From the city, not necessarily the Children's Museum.
I would need it from both. Well, I can get confirmation from the city, but I would need it from the Children's Museum since they, as leasing owner, told us that it was to be deferred. The 13th.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That works. See you later.
So we are going to move on to item number 1, which is 5 Killing Street. Frankie, if you would please give an introduction.
We need to set up for first item.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, my fault. Has the board had a chance to review the meeting minutes from September 8th? And if so, are there any corrections or changes, or do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Julia's moved for approval, second by Fillmore. All in favor?
Aye.
Laura's abstaining because she wasn't at the meeting. So the motion carries in the minutes. Sorry, now we are on to 5 Killian Street. And Laura Altman is our board alternate. Thank you for joining us tonight. But Laura has stepped away from being a board member and is now going to speak after Frankie introduces the project on behalf of the project.
And for the audience, Laura has already recused herself from voting on this item. 5 Killian Street is requesting demolition of historic structure. There was a site visit this morning at 8:30. It is not rated in West Side, circa 1935, in the historic materials demolition purview. This is the property's location on Killian Street. There's some existing site photos next to New Home Street Baptist Church. Some context of Killian Street. A Sanborn map showing the history of the building. I will turn it over to you, Laura.
Thank you. I'm Laura Altman, LFA Architecture. I am representing New Home Street Baptist Church. Gwen and Thad Miller as representatives from the church. Yes, we are requesting demolition, but really disassembling and salvaging the materials that are there. And I want to be very clear that this is not demolition by neglect at this point. The project was previously denied demolition on March 24th. But since that time, we have had a huge team working very hard to save this building, putting in countless hours and all kinds of efforts. This includes the church itself, Friends of the Church, Historic Charleston Foundation, Preservation Society, city staff people, and structural engineer. We had matters involved in Habitat for Humanity also. Through that process, we completely documented the building prior to the roof collapse. So Matters did a 3D scan of the building before the roof collapsed. We used that along with my field measurements to build a 3D Revit model. HCF and Preservation Society provided interns this summer to fully document the history of the building itself, the property, and the church history. We have applied for several grants, and were awarded one grant to help with planning for structural engineering and surveying. We put together some shoring plans that were then completely revised after the roof collapsed on July 22nd, just due to rain. And then stabilization started at the end of August, beginning of September. During that work, during the removal of the remaining roof, the gable, front, and the chimney collapsed. Going back, I want to give a little history. The project, the Freedman's Cottage, was built between 1902 and 1960, based on Sanborn maps, the deeds for the property, and newspaper articles. You have in your packet, there's a full history that was put together by HCF and Preservation Society interns. The church itself moved to Home Street, well, it was then Home Street, it's now Killian Street, in 1938 when they built the church there, and they purchased the cottage in 1965. Over the years, the building has changed significantly. There was an especially significant change in footprint between the 1944 and the 1951 Sanborn maps, whereas almost like the footprint flip-flopped. The porch was at the rear left of the building, and then in 1944 and by 1951, flip-flopped, so it was at the front left of the building. So that indicates that the roof structure was probably changed at that time. So most of the materials may be dating to that time frame post 1944. This project has had every possible challenge that could affect a Charleston house. the church would like to create a community center there to support their outreach efforts that are already existing. The building itself, the cottage, is historic, but it's not in the historic district, so we can't get a FEMA variance. We have preservation goals that are at odds with the desire to use low maintenance materials, and at odds also with floodproofing measures. The building needs to be accessible and ADA compliant, yet that is at odds with elevating the building above the flood zone. So the flood zone is at 5 feet above grade with the design flood elevation 7 feet above grade. And again, we can't get a FEMA variance. And then on top of all of those challenges, we have the challenge of funding. Even though we can't really talk about funding here, it is a significant issue with this particular project where we're trying to not only save the Freedman's Cottage, we're trying to save an historically Black church, keep them in the midst of their community, maintain that diverse community, and make it a thriving space. So where are we now? Very little remains of the building that is actually structurally sound. The roof is July 22nd, between the front chimney and the back gable end. Then during stabilization, when they were taking down the remaining portion of the roof, the chimney collapsed, the front gable fell because it wasn't balloon framed, which we would have expected of an older structure. If we go forward with the restoration, we would have to remove even more material in order to floodproof and create a tight envelope. Either floodproofing means that we would have to dry floodproof and add concrete block walls or poured concrete walls, completely change the wall structure in order to hold out the hydrostatic pressure, or we would need to completely reinforce the floor system, which is nearly gone, in order to elevate the house. We are trying to salvage materials. We have a small amount of material salvaged from the roof. Much of the roof materials broke into small pieces because of termite damage and just rot. And then we have salvaged about a half pallet of brick that came from the chimneys when the chimney fell. So we are requesting demolition. It's very hard for me to be back here after working so hard with this group at that and Glenn here as representatives of the church, Preservation Society, Stuart Charleston. Everybody has been so supportive and worked so hard together. So it pains me to be here asking for demolition. Tried our best. And I just want to mention for the record that I feel this is part of a bigger issue that we can all do better. We need to catch deferred maintenance much, much earlier. If we had maybe come in 5 years ago, maybe we could have saved this building, repairing a small leak here and there, and maintaining the building so that we didn't end up here. Because deferred maintenance is extremely costly in the long run. And it's not just an issue above Line Street or in certain neighborhoods. I ran into the same issue at 70 Logan Street and with my own church, St. Matthew's Lutheran, right on Marion Square. So I'm hoping that we can learn from this, lessons learned from this project and really take it forward to help others in the future so that we don't get in the same situation. Thank you for listening. Any questions I have to answer?
Thank you.
And I do have a letter here from McKenna Coon, 3 Killian Street, if you want to read this. I guess this would go under public record, but that's the neighbor to the south.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions of Ms. Alton?
I have a quick one only because I wasn't here first time before, but thank you for the documentation. It's super thorough. But is it your opinion from what I was saying that when the footprint changed with the way that it looks like there was a original structure, which that the roof form changed too?
That's my guess based on the footprint. It's hard for me to know for sure.
Right.
I just don't have quite enough background experience on looking at those old rafters to be able to tell what type of they were. They're not super modern. They were chunky
Right.
rafters, but I don't know.
And from the photos, it looks like they're old, but it'd be very odd to have that roof form continued forward
Right.
with that. So,
That was my thought.
okay.
And I wasn't here March 24th.
Yes.
So I'm not sure.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
Is there any public comment?
April Woods, Stuart Charleston Foundation. HCF has spent considerable time with the applicant team led by Laura Altman, who is working pro bono trying to identify solutions for the long-term solution of 5 Killian Street. Our summer interns worked alongside conservation societies, intern to assess the condition of the structure and document the remaining historic materials. We have observed firsthand the progression of the deterioration that accelerated over the summer with the heavy rains. At this point, it is clear to us that the building is unsafe and retains very little salvageable historic material. Should the board decide to approve demolition, it should feel comfortable that the building is very well documented and that every effort has been exhausted to save the structure. The application before you far exceeds any demolition application we have seen previously in its thorough analysis, documentation, and evaluation of the structure. Regardless of the outcome, we will support the board's decision on this application.
I'm going to give the Preservation Society of Charleston, we want to echo HCF's comments and say that the Preservation Society has been closely involved with the preservation efforts of 5 Killians since its demolition was denied earlier this year. And it's been an honor to get to know this special building and work with such a talented, passionate group of people. We want to commend the architect for leading a valiant effort to save the structure and navigate the challenges of historic preservation goals, creating a feasible plan for a community center, and meeting building code and flood mitigation requirements. The thoroughness of the documentation submitted with this application serves as a clear testament to these efforts. However, despite best intentions, Mother Nature was against us, and the building suffered a series of unfortunate collapses during storm events. We feel the architect has built the right team for this property to be redeveloped sensitively, and therefore we do not oppose the disassembly of what is left of the building.
Is that everything from public? So we have a letter that, is it appropriate that I read that into the record?
Typically, written comments are required to be provided to the board 24 hours in advance, but if members of the church would like to read this for their friend who is not here, do not object.
So ma'am, if you would just state your name and the name of the person who provided the letter.
My name is Gwendolyn Miller, and her name is McKenna Cohen.
Thank you.
City of Charleston, and who would be concerned, as I am unable to attend this meeting this afternoon regarding the takedown of 5 Killian Street. I am writing this letter. The structure is a danger to the neighborhood, and I ask it to be taken down. As the house directly next to 5 Killian Street, I worry that any given time, the house will fall. My names are truly exaggerating when I think about the potential damage it could do to my home or worse, a person. With all understanding or the desire to preserve historic structure, I do not believe 5 Killian serve any benefit to not be taken down and be rebuilt tastefully with the story in mind. For the safety of the neighborhood, please consider this allowance to take down the structure. Thank you for your consideration, McKenna Cohen, 3 Killian Street.
Thank you. So if that is all the public comment, city staff could please add their information.
Ms. Allman provided a little bit of a timeline. We did amend that timeline to provide some additional dates where she was in contact with us. So initially this was denied by the board on March 24th, as stated in their timeline. There are meetings between the church and Habitat for Humanity. We were contacted by the applicant in May regarding the project as she was taking it on. And there have been numerous interactions between Ms. Altman, between the church, National Trust Funds, Preservation Society, Historic Charleston Foundation. Additional documentation has been provided to BAR staff. We've also been in constant contact with the building department. Since the roof fell in July, we have been referring to the chief building official. There was originally concerns that the building would have to be ordered down due to public safety concerns. He has been working with Ms. Altman, trying to allow them to salvage as much as possible. So at the moment, they have not ordered the building down. We have been coordinating stabilization throughout July and August, working with building plan review in order to get the stabilization permits. And then we've met with Ms. Altman, the building officials, after the last building collapse, end of August, 1st of September. We've also had enforcement officers visiting the site, checking the status. Staff would really like to commend the applicant and the property owners on all of their efforts to preserve the structure, and much like preservation societies, we feel it's a tragedy that the weathering circumstances have prevented the preservation from happening. That said, we would like to recommend approval of this demolition to allow for disassembly and reuse.
Thank you, Frankie. Ms. Altman, do you have any clarifications or questions about any of the public or staff comment? Thank you. We'll now move into board discussion.
I understand the quandary. It's sad that it got as far as it did before there was an intervention to try to save it, but it does at this point seem like one of those cases where there's really just no viable way forward. And I really appreciate all the efforts that have been made this year to try to save it and do the right thing. But I understand the position that you're in now, and I think comfortable with approving demolition. And I trust that the team will do what they intend to do. We don't have any, purview over that, but either way, I'm comfortable, and I understand the application of the request, and I'm comfortable with allowing it to be demolished. Disassembled.
Yes, I certainly commend Laura and the church and the team for their efforts. It was commendable, and the result is unfortunate, but it's there. There's very little left of the building as far as material is concerned. Actually, even the form, I think, has been substantially lost. I mean, the roof is called, the footprint has been pretty dramatically changed over the years, and as recently as the 1950s. And so I am comfortable with approving the demolition.
Agreed. I don't think I need to say any more. It's spot on and well documented. Thank you.
I will briefly add, having walked through this before, or alongside it, not through it, but around it previously. It's regrettable that we're 3 to 5 years too late, and I hate that. I think Laura laments that as well. But I would be remiss to not add that the level of study and the level of thought and detail that went into this application for a demolition is really what the board should see for demolition applications. It's not a fly-by-night application to remove the building, and I think it shows that you all have very carefully thought through this. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion for approval of demolition to allow disassembly and reuse.
So we have a motion on the floor from Fillmore, the second by Julia. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes with majority, 4-0 in favor. Thank you. Item number 2 is 651 King Street.
Okay. 651 King Street is requesting preliminary approval for a new mixed-use building. Sure, this was not surveyed and came from the LA Borough, but it would be new in the Owensburg District. This is the property's location at King and Lime Street. Some site photos. Some context. We're not showing the previous structure on site. And we will turn it over to the applicant.
All right, thank you, everybody. My name is Will Morrison with the Middleton Group, and I'm here joined this afternoon with Joel Rogers from our office and also Greg Smith from AK Partners from the ownership. And yeah, we're excited to talk to you today about the developments that we've made on the design for the 651 King project. And, you know, since the last conceptual approval meeting back in July, because some people may or may not have been here at the last meeting, I'm just going to do a really brief summary and then jump into, you know, the ways in which we've addressed some of the discussion items from the last project. As Frankie showed, we're at the intersection of King and Line. It's kind of a unique site in that it's a really tight sliver on the corner there that used to be the home of a grocer with residents above, and was since lost to time. And it's kind of at a pocket of 2 to 3 story residences that come up, and all around it on the south, north, and east sides are upcoming large developments, 4.5 and above story projects. And we saw this as a great opportunity to provide a project that is a transition not only in scale but also in in aesthetics and feel at home with the local residences, but also won't be so dwarfed and by the new upcoming developments. Next slide, please. A lot of the discussion at the last BAR meeting really focused in our minds, kind of distilled the 3 sort of major topics. One was about materiality and detailing, which, you know, will always kind of further develops as we move into the preliminary stage. How we articulated the 3rd story penthouse and its relationship to King Street and Line Street, and trying to kind of push that back and give deference to King Street and make it less prominent. And then the 3rd thing was taking a look of, you know, further developing the north elevation that abuts the neighboring property, and finding ways to give it detailing and the, you know, respect it deserves, even though it can't have fenestration or whatnot because of its proximity to that property line, and coming up with ways to detail it that does not involve vegetation, which we talked at length about last meeting. Next slide, please. So this is the material palette. I also brought physical samples if you would like. We tried to, you know, keep a nice refined palette of colors, a nice small palette that we then, you know, use texture and other materiality to try and differentiate throughout the project. The first 2 floors would utilize more traditional materials as it's part of that sort of transition up. And we would use mahogany windows and storefront and paneling with a nice dark, you know, rich sealer. We're looking at brick, painted brick around a majority of the 2-story volume, and then utilizing you know, brick detailing, cornices, whatnot, along with herringbone pattern and some of these recesses that we'll get into later, to add some nice texture to that brick wall. And then having the penthouse be an opportunity for contrast, not only in color using kind of the dark grays, but also in material, having the standing seam roof kind of coming down and turning from the roof form down the wall on the west side, and then utilizing the smooth ACM panels around the rest of the penthouse. Next slide, please. I think Ricky did a good job showing context photos, but I included these just so that kind of, you know, remind everyone of what the local context is. You know, we've got a residence to the north and to the west, and, you know, we've we talked a lot last time about different strategies we're employing and trying to show difference to them. And these are the same photos we're going to be looking at in a moment when we're kind of walking through the renderings. And I'm going to try and touch on those three topics I mentioned earlier in hopefully a more fluid way as we go through the renderings and kind of touching on things as we go through, walk around the building. Next slide, please. So this is the rendering facing south on King Street from the last presentation. So next slide, please. So you can see that we further detailed the with some of the comments that came up last time, the storefront and kind of our vision of character of that. You can see that it turns up the north face of the building as well. Even though that side is minimally visible, it will be partially visible as you're kind of going along south on King Street. So we wanted to have that wrap the corner. And then when we get into the elevations later, you'll see that we also have the rhythm of the windows of recesses kind of matching the windows on the south side. One of the primary things you can see here is that we pulled back the overhang extension and we took away those heftier columns that gave it, more prominence on King Street and replaced them with smaller, more delicate brackets to once again try and pay deference to King Street and pull that back and give it more of the penthouse feel versus being too oppressive on the streetscape. Next slide, please. So this is the facing west towards the King Street elevation. Next slide, please. So this is the new version. One thing we talked about at the last meeting was further articulating the surrounds around the windows that are above the storefront. And we also wanted to give a hierarchy to the windows and how they're treated. So on King Street, we were proposing to have a more substantial cast stone surround that's in similar character to that of the recesses. The brick recesses around the other windows that we'll talk about on Line Street in a moment, but also, give that hierarchy of kind of the more prominent three windows on King Street and then moving down the Line Street elevation. I think this view also, you can see that we've continued to compress the width of the third story penthouse, which is one of the discussion items from the last meeting, trying to give as much as possible back to Line Street while still having that be programmatically viable up there. So I think we ultimately got about 2.5 feet on each side, so 5 feet out of it, 25, 26 foot, depending on where you are in the site. We felt that was about what we could accomplish there. Next slide, please. This is from the last presentation. Next slide. And you can see here much of what I've already talked about. You can see the rhythm of the windows coming down Line Street. You can start to see that hierarchy I was talking about, where you've got the pronounced cast stone surrounds on King Street, and then it moves to the brick recesses that then extend down and then ultimately terminate at the exterior expression of the programmatic connection of that the entry to the residence, starting there and going to the second and third floors. And you can also see that we've taken another look at the fenestration along the south elevation there, and we wanted to look at a portion that was more tall and slender and more in line with the residential windows on the second floor below, with the light pattern and the verticality of it, so that kind of reads more along the lines of the continuation of that residential floor. Next slide, please. Next slide. And then here you can once again see the recesses. You can see the standing seam on the third floor turning down from the roof above. And then also one of the previous staff comments was to reduce the depth of the overhang at the residential entry to kind of decrease its prominence and make it a little less bulky. So you can see that we've employed that there. Next slide, please. So we actually included 2 new renderings as well to give the board and everyone a better understanding of kind of how this would feel at the corner. Here's from more of a vehicular perspective, facing north on King Street. If you go to the next slide, please. Included a night rendering, more atmospheric than anything, just give the understanding of our intent to really bring new life to this corner, and will be a great counterpoint and anchor on the other side of Barca, and really bring more energy to this area. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm gonna ask if you can somehow get to slide 27, which is A204, just so that we can, okay, I will be very brief. We'll just, I just wanted to show the north elevation because it's something we talked about. Next two slides. Okay, so we've got the previous and the new. So you can see, like I talked about before, we're continuing that storefront, kind of matching the south elevation, going about as far as we feel is really visible, and also honestly something that can be constructed because we actually have a short masonry wall that's kind of running along the property line that will make really going beyond that difficult. And then also we employed the recesses with that same rhythm that you can find on the south elevation in the same detailing. I just want to thank you for your time. We obviously really embraced the comments last time. I think the discussion was a good discussion, and we hope that everyone feels that the project is really coming along. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
I would like to see that.
Sure.
And I do have a couple of questions.
Okay. Sure.
My question was about the beam at the corner. I'm going to go back and you see one of the renderings that shows the corner. Like typically, historically, that beam is dropped, like in every example I can think of, all your examples, the beam over the corner column is dropped. I was just curious if it was intentional that you raised it there, and you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Typically, this row of panels continues, and the column's a little shorter. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the ceiling in that corner is a little lower. It's just typical, and I just wanted to get your perspective on whether that was intentional or whether you might want to look at that.
So, I think we liked how open that corner view was, and I don't know how familiar everyone is with that corner. I'm sure very familiar, but it's also not the safest corner, let's say. There have been lots of people kind of, I guess our thought was the more open we can keep that corner and keep that view triangle open, the better. That being said, we are not opposed to looking at lowering that, having that paneling continue. So that's something that we would be happy to restudy.
And second question, you're thinking to stain like sapele for all the wood, the windows and the storefront?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sure.
I think that's all I got for now.
Any other questions? Thank you. Public comment?
And again, with Conservation Society of Charleston, we feel the building design is much improved from the last meeting, and specifically the depth and quality of details are well developed. However, we continue to struggle with the prominence of the third story, the increasing angle of the roof as it approaches King Street, and the heavy eave overhang should be reduced to have a more subtle, quieter presence.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation, the application for 651 King Street. We do not feel that the changes to the third floor meet the board's condition from July 28th meeting to come down the third floor. There have been minimal changes to the design. For the record, we continue to believe that the building should include a traditional gable roof, at least on the sides that face the street. This is a highly visible corner, and a traditional gable would fit in better with the context of surrounding buildings that are of this 2 to 3 story scale. We recommend deferral based on architectural direction of the third floor. And we also wanted to state that we do appreciate the quality and the detailing of the first and second floors, as well as the scale of the overall building. Thank you.
Any other public comment? I will ask, is there do we have Jarrett Hudson in the audience? We have a comment that was submitted online from Jarrett Hudson at 67 Line Street. But the way the comment was delivered, it really is a livability issue. And so I don't think it's fair to read a livability item about noise into the architectural review board record. So I'm just going to make note for the meeting that if Mr. Hodson has anything architecturally to discuss with the applicant, he should reach out to them. And then livability items would be livability department and or the zoning department. So with that, we'll move on to Frankie for city comments, the city recommendation.
Observations, staff noticed that the third floor mass had been visibly reduced. Applicant has responded to previous comments, and revisions also include a better window rhythm at the third level. Staff has no concern over the proposed materials, finishes, or colors, noting the palette to be neutral, timeless, and warm. Comments, the cornice does extend over the property line, and it will require encroachment permits. We just wanted to be aware of that. I did speak to zoning, who's been working with engineering, so be aware, and they'll probably discuss it with you at TRC.
Yeah, no.
And while appreciative of the treatment, the continuation of storefront this time around the north elevation should be either reduced or omitted, and it is atypical to be on an elevation which is not street facing or courtyard facing. Staff recommendation is for preliminary approval with board and staff comments.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the public comments?
Yeah, sure. I'll be brief. I mean, we still feel that the roof form on the third floor, we still stand behind it and feel that that ascension is a nice nod and transition to the larger developments upcoming down that way. In terms of the reduction, we try to reduce everything as much as possible, including the overhang, to the point, where it's still something that is a usable feature for the inhabitants of the third floor. And we appreciate the other comments, and we're happy to take a look at the storefront system and the storefront as it relates to the corner.
Thank you. So we will now enter board discussion.
If you don't mind, I have one more question for the applicant.
Sure.
Am I reading your data lines properly that the ceiling height on that third floor goes from about 9'6" and then presumably sort of vaults up toward the east?
Yeah,
Does that sound right?
that it sounds right.
Like 11-ish or something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Just be talking about, right? All right, so I'll start. I liked this design before, and I like it more now. I still think it's really, I think the scale and the concept are appropriate, strong. The materials generally make sense. I'm always a little nervous about staining wood for the long haul. It just seems like it was sort of a trend in the past few years, and it doesn't necessarily age well. It takes a lot of maintenance. So just throwing that out there. And along the lines of staff's comment about the storefront returning, to me, yeah, a good bit of that north elevation, the faux-ness of it, I don't think is really necessary myself. I'd rather just see some sort of design with the brickwork or, some gesture so that it's not a giant blank wall, but I don't personally feel the need to dress it up as if it had been something in the past with these windows in the storefront. So I'd be okay with simplifying that. And last thing, I guess sort of feel like there is a little bit of height that could be conceded at that third floor, since it currently is a minimum of 9.6 and then goes up from there toward the front. So maybe that could be dropped a foot or so, and maybe that would really help with some of the concerns about its prominence. But otherwise, I think I like it.
I would agree. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I appreciate comments of those that were and following it along. I do, again, concur that appreciate again the effort to provide something other than just a blank wall on the north side, but would suggest losing the wood treatment, and it could be with some relief for some modulation, as Ms. Martin was referencing. And that also help with long-term maintenance if it's difficult to access from that side. It looks like it might be tight. Secondly, I think your material palette's nice. And if any way, like I said, I'll defer to some of the others who may have been here at the last application to mitigate that height slightly. It would be nice. I know, like you said, from the other things that are happening in that area, they're much taller. So it's a little hard for us to say so, but as it relates to the structure, the way you got it designed, if there was the ability to do that, I think it would only enhance it.
I don't disagree with the comments so far. I think the suggestions that have been made are all positive by my fellow board members. I think that the principal part of the building is very handsome. Like Julia, I'm always concerned about a lot of clear finish on the front of a building, particularly with very limited overhangs. It's a maintenance problem. But, I think that the building proper is handsome, and I like it. When it was before I expressed my concern about the third floor appendage. I think I appreciate the reduction that's been made, but I think it still appears to dominate the architecture of the building, which I think is unfortunate, and the eyebrow is very prominent. Very dominant, so I still have concerns about the third floor appendage and the fact that I think it dominates what is otherwise very attractive architecture.
I wasn't here at the last meeting when this was presented, but I enjoyed reviewing the drawings and seeing how much it's advanced. I don't disagree with, well, I agree with what Julia and Eddie were saying about the building in general. And in terms of the third floor, I could see bringing that down might help balance some of these other concerns. My only real comment is that personally, I think this is a great example of balancing the historic nature and all of the new stuff that's coming along, not trying to be a fake old building, not trying to exactly replicate what was there historically, but giving a nice nod to it and saying this is of our time.
All right. How about a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments and board comments to further reduce the height of the third floor element? I'm gonna specify how much. But I don't mean like 1 inch. And to reconsider the clear coated mahogany finish. Just to think about it a little more. And I almost think it could be final review by staff. Yeah, final review by staff.
Did you want to add a comment about the north side?
That was staff comments number the twos that should be reduced or omitted, and I think the applicant understood all that. Thank you.
I would second that, and I think again, with Martin, that everybody's concerned, for lack of a better word, with the staining, as we've said, it's just over time, it becomes a maintenance thing, it starts to fade in the sun and all of that, so it's something that you have to be aware of, so it's not unattractive, it's a long-term issue. Yeah, I'll second that as stated.
Frankie, do you have the details of the motion?
I do.
So Julia has made a motion for preliminary approval, the staff comments and a few board comments. Eddie has seconded that motion.
Could you read the board comments? I was
So my note is that board comments are to further reduce the height of the third floor element, reconsider the clear coat on the mahogany, and to address the north, not to address the north wall. Sorry.
Section 30 and staff comments.
yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Chair votes
All
majority.
opposed?
Oh, sorry. Oh, were you opposed?
I didn't speak.
Oh, I thought your mouth.
I'm still considering.
Okay. Sorry.
Um, I'm okay with the board comment.
So chair votes in favor, and this passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is 91 Nassau Street. Sorry. I have your dinner platter.
CD tray.
Nassau is requesting conceptual approval for the new residence.
Yes, I see, all right, it is nice.
I'll wait till everyone settles down. The historic structure is a category 4 in East Side, circa 1852, in the Old City District. This is the location on Nassau Street. Some existing site photos. Context of Nassau. And some sandboard maps showing the progression of the historic structure. I will turn it over to them.
My name is Clark Ferguson. I'm the architect for 91 Nassau Street. This project is for a new construction in the rear yard of the existing historic structure on Nassau Street. Since the last meeting, we've made several revisions. We've changed the vertical metal siding to a horizontal flat siding. We've reduced the number of windows by 8. Changed the windows, the casement windows to 6/6 double or single hung. We're not sure. And we've also changed the upper roof. Quite it down a few inches. If you can go to T1.3, you can see this existing structure on the right, our proposed structure on the left. The ones on the bottom were from the previous meeting. The ones on the top of the page are current proposal. You can see how we changed the siding, the windows, roof. We go to A 2.0. Back one.
Sorry, keys stick a little.
The two elevations on the left are the front of the existing house up front on Nassau Street, historic structure. The two elevations on the bottom of the previous meetings, and the two elevations above, you can see the changes we've made. The siding, the windows, the roof. And on the 2.1, same thing, we have the previous elevations bottom of the page, and then above those are the elevations. the time when I turned this in, we waited 2 weeks until after the last meeting. And at that time, the bar notes had still not been, were not available. So it was only going on from what I talked to staff. On my cover sheet, I listed the 3 items that were mentioned to me: the metal siding, the windows, the slope, of the roof. And after this was submitted, the bar notes were made available. Just saying that ahead of time, I would have.
I understood. We apologize. Apparently there was a miscommunication among staff as to whether or not it had been posted.
So, but with that in mind, and now that I've had a chance to read those, I know that part of them happy with the our balcony. We were trying to do something a little interesting there, but didn't have a document. We can change that. So now I'm curious to see, what the comments are on what more you'd like for us to do to get approved and move on to the next part.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
The questions. What siding are you thinking? I know this is conceptual, but do you know what kind of siding you're aiming for?
The owner would like to go with the fiber cement siding, artesian style like Hardy has, and it's thicker, so you have more shadow line. I've heard comments 2 meetings ago that wasn't available, and I called Hardy. They say it's still available.
They did?
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, that's news too, because they keep telling us it's not available.
It is?
No, sir, if it's available, that's correct, because we've been told it's not also.
I was just curious what you were intending, and then my other question has to do with the I guess the rate condition. Maybe this is just a drawing thing, or you're still working through it since this is conceptual. But on the side elevations, the north and the south, it looks like the gable and the rake extend pretty far past the north and south walls. But then when you look at the west and east, it's like really tight. So I just wasn't sure if that was.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could pull it out, but when we look at, go back to, I guess, 2.0. See how we're touching the, we're supposed to stay directly behind the front house and not go beyond it. I kept that in. I like it to go out. And also noticed the part of the comments about the whole structure to be thinner. The structure then would go deeper with the oak.
Okay, I was just trying to understand if that was intentional. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment?
April Wood, start Tustin Foundation, HCF has reviewed the application and recommended approval. Although the design has improved, we still have some concerns about the architectural direction of this project. The first comment is that the roof pitch is too shallow. This should be increased to a traditional roof pitch. Second, the fenestration pattern is inconsistent and should be simplified. In some areas, the windows on the second floor are larger than those on the first floor. On the east elevation, the French doors on the second floor should be aligned with the first floor windows. We recommend that the balcony on the east elevation should be narrower and not extend the entire width of the east elevation. We recommend deferral so that architectural direction can be addressed.
And then again, with Preservation Society of Charleston, we appreciate the architect taking the design in a more traditional direction to relate to the primary house and surrounding context. However, the structure now takes on a very suburban character, particularly in terms of the proportions of the fenestration and the roof form. Also, in keeping with our previous comments and further requirements of the ordinance, the house needs to be reduced in width and height to be properly subordinate to the primary structure. So we urge the board to defer the application.
Any other public comment? Hearing none, Frankie, if you will provide the city's recommendation.
Staff observation, we appreciate the attention to detail in adapting the architecture to be more compatible with the historic structure. And we just have one comment that the balcony would appear more balanced and visually supported with the addition of brackets. Our recommendation is conceptual approval with staff comments and then final review by staff.
Would you like to clarify any public positions or respond?
No, I appreciate all the comments and, I'm willing to do most anything. I agree the fenestrations could be better. We can get it more of a pitch on the roof by lowering the ceiling height on that first floor. I can bring it down, I can do that. And then lower, well, it'd be tricky if I'm trying to raise the pitch, lower the bill at the same time. I don't know how much I can take out. The only hardest thing is going to be to try to reduce the width of the house. We've only got so much to work with. I know that's not your concern, what we're trying to do inside. If we had any, map, that'd be great, but we would not have to reduce the width. I think we can bring it down and increase the pitch of the roof. I can look at the windows. Specify you're letting the use any balcony at all. But, if you are, we might keep it. Work with that. I think, I like to move forward, get past this point. When you say conceptual approval, staff comments with final review by staff, what's that last part? Final review by staff.
That it wouldn't come back to the board if that is the motion the board makes. The final review would be done by staff, and we typically do that within the permit.
Right. Correct. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's held up here at conceptual, and now it's like, before we.
If the board moves to have give conceptual approval with the final review by staff, you wouldn't require any reviews until you ready to submit documents for permitting.
Correct.
So board will now move into discussion.
I think from where you started our last time, it's definitely probably more appropriate for this spot in this direction, which is great. And it's a tight site. And to be honest, I feel like at least width wise, you are subordinate. It's lesser in width than the house in the front. And understand from your profile drawings on A 2.0, that you're trying to keep that pitch lower than what's in the front of it. I think again, it'd be improved if it was a greater pitch, something that's a little bit more proportional. I don't know that the balcony serves a purpose to you. I know it's just a little bit and it modulates it, but personally, I think it's maybe even more successful if it's just larger windows there or something and without a balcony. But my take on it was that an increase of the pitch. Just as simple as it could be, that would accomplish. And that even in its form and detailing is subordinate to the front house, and it already is in width.
I think I largely agree with Eddie. I think the biggest problem is the pitch on the roof, and that might be achieved by down the second floor ceiling. Like a little, even though I know everybody wants in the main living areas of the house, the public areas of the house, everybody wants nice ceilings nowadays, but they're not absolutely necessary, and increasing the pitch on that roof will improve the look. I think the fenestration is a little odd. It could be sorted out. That can certainly dealt with relatively easily. And the little balcony, I think it needs work for me. It just needs to go away.
And what I would just clarify, not to disagree, but to be honest, I understand kind of the trying to work within the profile, but I personally don't feel like it needs to be lowered to 8 feet to work within that.
I think that, I mean, I think it's on the edge of being too big, but I understand there's not a lot of space. And so I think the basic footprint could survive if that roof pitch could be improved.
Right, but I guess
And the height.
the pitch could increase, but he doesn't have to reduce it, in my opinion, at the second level.
I guess I would,
Right.
it occurs to me that even if you lowered the plate to 8, did that, it seems like it wants to be vaulted in there anyway.
Right.
The main living space, and your first floor is already an 8, so we've got nowhere to go there. Yeah, I guess I agree with what's been said. I think some change to the roof pitch would be really helpful, and I would think hard about the eave condition. There's some things that are sort of fighting with each other, like somehow the south elevation almost looks like a historic building except for the roof with the 6/6 windows, and then the east elevation is trying to be a little contemporary, so there's some discord there that I think you could simplify. Maybe just use 2/2 windows and just simplify things. I'm not opposed to the balcony. I agree with Historic Charleston Foundation and others that the width should be reduced so that it's not hanging right off the corner of the building. But it's definitely moved in the right direction.
Because I agree with the comments about the roof and the balcony maybe shrinking it. And this is a comment really more as you go forward into details, but I feel that entrance on the south elevation where you've got your recess, that opening in the main wall needs a little bit more detailing of some sort. It doesn't have to be super traditional, but I think it needs a little something rather than the side of just continuing straight across. But again, that's not necessarily a conceptual. Yeah.
I am on board with most of what's been said, and I definitely agree with the comments about the roof pitch and pinching that balcony in a bit so it doesn't go edge to edge. We ready to make a motion?
Right, I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments and 3 board comments. 1, to increase the roof pitch. 2, to narrow the balcony. 3, to unify/simplify the style.
I will second that.
We have a motion on the floor from Julia with a second by Laura. Frankie, do you have the details of this motion? All in favor?
Did the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to clarify where this heads.
Okay, final review by staff.
That includes final review by staff. All in favor?
Aye.
I hear 4 in favor. Chair votes with the majority, 5-0. The motion carries. Our next item on the agenda is 6 Prelo Street. I am recusing from this project or this application, so Julia is going to kindly step in as vice chair.
Sam is first.
All right, the next item is 6 Prelude Street.
So Prelude is requesting final approval for construction of 2 single-family buildings on vacant lot governed by Factorsville PUD. It was not surveyed in the French Quarter. It will be new in the old and historic districts. This is the location of the site on Prelude Street. Some existing site photos looking from Prelude and from Concord. Context of Prelude. And we will turn it over to the applicant.
Hello, I'm Amber Ahmed. I designed 6 Prelude, and this project was in front of the board seeking preliminary approval on August 25th, upon which it received unanimous approval. Both board and staff were very complimentary in the ways in which we had addressed previous comments and implemented them into the design. As we moved to final, the one request was that we provide some physical samples for materiality. So I'd like to direct us to sheet A 5.1. So this is the material inspiration, and then Frankie would like to move to the next slide. All right, so here we have a finished schedule and a partial elevation of ways in which we're planning the building. So the base of the building would be masonry construction, and then stone, limestone, smooth stucco finish applied to that base. I've got 2 samples, and I'm anxious to hear board feedback. When I showed staff, one sample is almost a perfect color match to the brick that we would be proposing. And the other is like just a slight gradient darker. The intention would be to sort of differentiate that base. So either it's fully monochromatic with a textural difference, or it's rounded with the slightest hint of a tonal shift. I'm open to both. Can you see it in here? You can see it.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
It's subtle, but you can pick it up.
Okay, good.
I have your other materials as well.
All right, and so then as we move to the brick, it would be a painted brick. Both 8 Prelude and 5 Mid-Atlantic Wharf, the neighbors to the north, are both warm whites. So we would stay in step with them. And then in terms of windows, we're doing bronze, aluminum clad, exterior wood, interior, 5/8 inch mullion, STL with a putty profile. And then all of the bandboard, lintels, sills, cornices, those would all be cast stone to match the stucco base. And then the roof would be bronze to match the window, standing seam with a Kynar finish and hand crunch ridge. The front doors and the carriage doors, I initially thought that they would be mahogany with just a matte finish, but I heard in the previous presentations that maybe, yes, maybe it would be best to paint those, in which I would propose doing a color match to the windows.
Oh, all your questions. Thank you. So any of you have any questions for the applicant?
I have one question.
It was miscircled, yes. So it's not exposed fasteners. Is that what you were gonna ask?
Well,
Not
I
5B?
The 5B that you have in the drawings, and you mentioned stains. and
So it would-
hand crimp.
It would be standing seam hand crimped. I was looking at the spacing when I circled that, as opposed to the GS. Thank you.
Any public comment? And we'll move on to staff comments.
Project for preliminary approval at the August 25th meeting with minor comment. It was noted that a mock-up would be beneficial. Mock-up panels are typically for workmanship review. The applicant has provided samples of all the major exterior materials for review, and staff has no concerns regarding these selections. Board should determine if any additional review of material or workmanship is needed. Well, probably simply a drawing omission, add sills to the windows at the third floor, which are visible on sheet A3.4, and revise window H on the window schedule to include a 6-light grid as it does on the elevations. Staff recommendation is for final approval.
Thank you, Frankie. And thank you, Amber. Sorry, I didn't say thank you when you finished. The board discussion?
We have clarification about the third floor sills, because they're consistent on the drawings throughout.
Oh, you know what? I forgot that you could respond to staff's comments if you wanted.
So there's inconsistency on the drawing window schedule, you say?
That was a Tory comment, so I believe so, but I could look into that. Okay, that's in question.
I'm not entirely sure what the error was, but it would be consistent with the elevations of the restaurant. I would say, was that the window sills you were asking?
Yeah, the third floor windows
1K, 3,
on the
4,
drawings don't appear to have
sorry, yes,
sills.
they would have sills, so they would be uniform.
Matching the second floor as you got.
Now, board discussion.
I don't have any additional comments. I think it's good to me that I was not here for previous, so it seems that there wasn't much to address at that time.
That's largely unchanged from previous, except for the addition of the samples. And do we, is everybody on board satisfied that that's enough samples, or do we want to see a mock-up on the
Big building, but I think those are pretty simple, tried and true materials. I have one question for the applicant that I should have asked before. Somewhere, I think I saw stucco on frame. Is that happening at the parapet or somewhere?
It was probably just at the chimney.
Just at the chimneys is on frame. All right.
Did you reflect it on the chimney tonight?
I mean, if possible. I mean, I'm just typically scared of stucco on frame. I recognize that it's way above public right of way, but I would suggest considering that. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for final approval with the acceptance of the samples as submitted, and there's not necessarily a need or requirement for a sample panel. I mean, I think your palette's pretty simple and it's clear. But just I believe staff comments and board comment relating to maybe just investigating that chimney construction. Okay.
Okay, repeat the two board comments for staff. Sorry.
Okay.
Second one.
Eliminate, oh, I thought you said repeat your staff comments, which doesn't make sense, Marquis, so excuse me, okay. You say, eliminating the stucco on the frame and the, at the chimney and the parapets.
That was it?
I think so, yeah. If anybody else have any board comments?
Do you want to add a thing about the stained garage door? Okay. Oh, I can't. I can't second it.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. You know what the motion was,
Yes.
right? Okay,
I got it.
sorry, I'm so bad at it. Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just so we
No, that's all right. No problem.
Together.
Would you like to continue on?
No, thank
Up next, number 5, 23 Ann Street has been withdrawn from the agenda for clarification from ownership and applicant. So next is number 16 Murray Boulevard. So Frankie will introduce the project and then we will hear from the applicant. Oh, I'm sorry. Eddie Fava is recused from 16 Murray Boulevard.
16 Murray is requesting the special approval to infill corner voids while maintaining current footprint. It was not surveyed in Charlestown, surveyed in 1897, Oldham Historic District. Property's location, Murray Boulevard. Some existing site photos. Context of Murray. Sample not showing it was not there in 1955. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
Hey, I'm David Fisher from Thomas and Benson Architects. I would just out of curiosity like to know, I know Eddie has been involved with this project in the past. Is that the reason?
I believe so.
Okay, fair enough. There's a little typo on the agenda. The building was actually completed in 1984. I think it says tonight was 1997.
The earliest, that's the earliest date we confirmed. There was not one on the tax record, but we found something in the BAR records from 97, so that's where we got that.
Okay, fair enough.
So 84?
1984.
Okay.
This building is interesting. This home is interesting in its presence on Murray Boulevard. Two people, well, one in this room and one in the back, are responsible for late 20th century architecture on Murray Boulevard. I believe you did the house in the corner of Murray and Glenwood. Is that it? No, you didn't do that? Anyway, Eddie did the addition to the building up the street that sits back off the road. But, anyway, this was done originally by Steve Thompson of the Charleston Architectural Group. And if you've been around Charleston long enough, you've seen examples of this type of architecture, primarily out of the offices of LS3P. I can name Ronald McDonald House, CPW, the First Federal originally, now was South State, and then it's been closed, the branch bank in the corner of Moultrie and Rutledge. But anyway, it's a very stylized type of architecture, and in scale on Murray Boulevard, it's quite diminutive relative to much of the adjacent homes. So when the Hughes purchased the house, they came to Thomas and Benzinger at the recommendation of a contractor, and they asked us to study a means by which they could increase the interior condition space without increasing the building's footprint. And can you go to one of the floor plans, please? There we go. So what you're seeing here is a building that's basically strongly symmetrical to the east and west and north and south. And one of the things that the building was designed with were these cutouts, these two-story cutouts at the, this one is first and second floor, this one is first and second floor, this one is at the second floor, and this one's at the second floor. And if you go back to the existing elevations, the photos would be fine. Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about is these elements here. And I understand what I think the architect, the original architect, was trying to do. He was suggesting a pattern that exists in traditional Charleston architecture of the body of the house and the expression of a porch. What I don't want to do is go down the slippery slope of saying that our approach to picking up extra space without increasing the footprint is to come back and glaze these openings and basically capture the existing exterior space and make it conditioned space. So if you go to the proposed plans, you can see what we're talking about. Keep going. Thanks. Yeah, these are all the existing house that we documented. So, okay, here. This is the existing cutout. This is an existing cutout. And if you go up to the upper floor, next slide, please. This is the extension of the two-story cutout, corner, and this is a single-story cutout. So what we're doing is we're proposing that the exterior wall that is currently here, and basically here and here be pushed out to fill in these corners. And we're proposing that those corners, in an effort to sort of very delicately respect the existing look of the building, we're proposing that they be glazed. So the final result would be, Angie, do we have any renderings?
Yeah, but you go to
Yeah.
A601, A62.
That it? So if you look at the house now, it essentially looks like this. Here's the cutout. This is the front door, the front porch facing Murray Boulevard and the Ashley River. Front porch, Murray Boulevard, Ashley River. And what we're doing is we're proposing to take this component of the house and infill these two panels with glazed frame. And those are the ones that are most visible from the street. Angie, do we have one that shows Battery Place elevation? Yeah, so this is another example, and that is a single piece of glazing and a single piece of glazing. This is Battery Place and a single piece of glazing, and the other infill, the other pieces that we're proposing to fill in, we're borrowing from a particular vernacular down at 8 South Battery, which is, I think we've got a picture of that in our presentation.
One of the elevation pages.
Yeah.
Maybe A201.
It would be, well, this is an example. 8 South Battery has a porch on the, can't remember what side of the street it's on. But the porch is entirely enclosed with these louvered panels. And we decided that that was somewhat of an appropriate measure to use in this case. And what we've done is we've broken up the panels to align with the window heads. And this is the existing opening that the panels are infilling. This is a HVAC enclosure that the air handler units used to sit in this cutout. So we're pulling those out to allow more space to be added to the inside. And we're treating these two panels in the same fashion as what's going on down at 8 South Battery. So these are fixed louvers. They would be an aluminum product with a powder coat finish. And again, we're paying very close attention to the rhythms and the patterns around the entire perimeter of the house, and trying to come back in here and do this with as sensitive of an approach as possible to not really change the architectural appearance of the house as it currently is, but fill that program need that the homeowner has asked for to say, for instance, make bathrooms a little bit bigger. Just basically the space which was ornamental is now being captured and being brought into the house and serving program purposes that the owner has asked us to study for them. So that's my presentation, and I yield to the board.
Thank you, David. Does anyone have questions for the applicant?
Quick question on A201, the previous one. Can you just clarify for me what the infill on the first floor is on this elevation?
This is what you're seeing here. That's in the background. So this elevation goes like that, and the entrance, you come in from both sides and you go in here. That's the front door. That's about 6 feet back from this surface here. So these two panels of glass are in the same plane as this. This is open and lines up with that below. So this is a void, a proposed enclosure, and then the rest of this is that's a void too. The rest of this is all solid material.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Any other questions? Do we have public comment?
And then again with the Preservation Society, the Preservation Society is not supportive of this request. While not historic, this house has a strong traditional architectural character that responds to the historic context and is important to retain as designed. The house is rigorously symmetrical, and the open voids at the corners are reminiscent of Charleston's vernacular porches. The openness of the voids was very specific to the design intent of this building, and it is not a positive alteration to infill these areas just to gain interior square footage. We urge the board to deny the request. Thank you.
Other public comment? Hearing none. Would the applicant like to? Oh, I'm sorry, Frankie. City recommendation.
The BAR has a review principle where it states that thin mullions or muffin may be required on windows larger than 2 feet in any direction and shall not be located between or behind the outer glass surface. The depth of the mullion shall not be less than the width. So our comment per our review principle that we recommend restudy of the proposed windows. Large sheets of glass are typically inappropriate for this area, and windows should mimic the existing double windows on the house, which are being removed. We also recommend restudying the shutters. The current layout of the shutters gives a gives an appearance of sort of horizontal bands. But we just recommend restudying the pattern. Staff recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff comments.
Thank you. Now, would you like to respond to anything?
No, they're all fair points. I do appreciate the recommendations. Yeah, it's not a historic building, but it does have character, and we are extremely aware of the character that this building represents. It's mid-80s architecture, which is not abundant in the city of Charleston. And it also shows a clear intent on the original designer's part to have that representation of the house to porch relationship, which Charleston is so famous for. That is specifically why we chose to not tinker around with the infill and just head straight at it as if, we didn't want to try to be too clever or too cute about it. I do understand the comments about the shutters, and I do understand the comments about the large glazed areas, and we were sort of expecting there to be some reservations about what we were doing, but we just headed at this with the simplest, most expedient solutions that didn't alter the existing character of the building too much, and under the circumstances we will definitely take into into account those comments because they're all fair and valuable.
Thank you. There, the floor is closed for board discussion.
I'll start. My initial thought as I studied the drawings earlier today was that I felt the large windows were appropriate because it maintained that general overall aesthetic and was fitting for the age of the building. But I also understand Preservation Society's comments about balance and symmetry when you look at the ones that are open essentially as glass versus the shuttered ones, and maybe that might have to be aesthetic, but I am not opposed to the ones that are glass as being all glass because I think that maintains the original form.
I agree with Laura about the single large pane of glass. I mean, it's not something that is necessarily typical for us to see downtown, but I think it is harmonious with the aesthetic of this piece of architecture. I'm also not opposed to the shutters. I think it might be worth some restudying of the details of the proportion of the shutters, but a fair proposal. It does occur to me that perhaps like on the second floor, I guess that would be the northwest existing little porch. I'm not entirely clear what you gain from closing that in since it's kind of wedged behind the new stair. But in general, I think this is an appropriate update of a house that is a rare example of something from the worst decade ever that we want to hold on to.
Hey, I grew up in
I think that if you do this, it dramatically changes the character of the building. So my next question is that terribly important? I mean, it's a very interesting building, or does it change it in such a way that's overwhelmingly negative? I'm a little up in the air about it. I understand preservation's point that the building in his style is sort of unique. There are a couple other examples as mentioned around Charleston, which you can clearly understand the similarity and why they're done that way. If you're going to enclose them, the single panes of glass are best. I think putting unlit windows in there would just not work at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I am still a little materially undecided as to whether enclosing those is on that building is significant enough to say you shouldn't do it. The shutters, I'm crazy about that. Something maybe a little more original, or if you're going to close it with the glass on top, then maybe something a little more consistent might be. Or I'm not a different thought process about how to enclose that would better correspond to the clear glass enclosures, even if it's with glass. I think it's standard study. That part is standard study. But I think if you're going to enclose those spaces with glass, it should be a single pane.
I've been a little perplexed by this one, admittedly. This house is so of the moment. I guess, David, do you know anything about the quality of construction? Is everything
great. I mean, it's taken a beating over the years. It's the original detail and execution are kind of clunky. One of the things that we're proposing to do, in addition to closures, is to update the handrails to make them a little bit more delicate and more permanent and look. Right now, we have 2 pickets with like a 4x4 middle for the top rail, and we propose it as a part of this overall renovation to update those. Upper roof is at play. It's just asphalt shingle now. We're going to have a more permanent material on the roof. And one thing I wanted to mention, if it's appropriate, the portions of the cutouts that are filled with the fixed louvers are the ones that are least visible from the street. So we thought it was okay to. And also, those spaces do not need to be glazed. They are a part of bathroom expansions. So, if we were to come in there with a big piece of frosted glass or wood panels or something, that would be one solution. But looking locally at the way that porches have been infilled over the years, I know this is a taboo subject, this porch enclosures in downtown Charleston. In fact, I worked on the last project with BAR, let go through with the porch enclosure, and then after that it was all over. But to your point,
I thought it was the design of the building, it doesn't have shutters. It's not intended to have, it's sort of introducing another entirely different element. It's not currently there, and sort of not doing something like the glass enclosures are clearly highly intentional, and they're reading they're trying to continue to read the architecture of the building. The shutters just continue to do that.
So we will look further into alternatives to accomplish what we asked to do.
I would add that as this conversation is going, the front right, I don't know the cardinal directions, but the front right looks like maybe an hospitality bathroom. Would, because it's that Murray Boulevard elevation, if you can make that bottom, the first floor glass or something that mimics that, I don't know that I'd be as concerned about the back corner being the shutters, because it really is the farthest. I feel that this one on the front corner is very visible. And it contributes to the overall front elevation, the balance, and all of that.
So I was asking about quality because I had an epiphany. My cousin's house 100% had to have been designed by the same people, probably built the same year, over in the old village, and they've had a lot of trouble. They've kept it, but it quality of materials and workmanship from the mid '80s
Is
done
he
them
the
wrong.
original owner?
Yes.
I mean, you go over and you put your eyes on it, and there's some of the sidewalks settled. I mean, that's all made land that thing's on. So the banks of the Ashley River actually are in the back where the parking lot is, or where the driveway and the parking lot. So that building's on timber piles that go down something 90 feet. It's ridiculous. But some of the landscaping and some of the walkways have fallen away from settlement. And, there's not, they replaced the windows in the past couple of years. There's not a lot of problems with how the things are looking, but the McHughes have a contractor on board that I think has experience with building downtown and would understand the nature of getting the renovation right. And I also think it's important that the detailing that accompanies these enclosures be as minimally as intrusive as possible, because we don't want to start piling up all sorts of construction materials around these openings that take away from the original character.
I think I've always felt on this house that the mechanical area where the AC units and now our Renai and whatever else have all landed, it's really disrespectful of this house.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost, that clearly tells me that someone didn't love these open bays from day one because they threw the ugliest thing possible in them. But I also do think that this architecture is sort of something that is of its moment and to be really careful how you monkey with it.
Yeah.
I hear that y'all are trying to be respectful of that. But those are just my sort of observations.
Again, I think it's a fairly thoughtful and appropriate proposal. The only that really would be to sort of restudy the design of the shutters and maybe have them be something that relates more to the aesthetic building. I'm going to make a motion for conceptual approval, staff comment 2. And we'll review by staff.
We have a motion from Julia. Do we have a second?
Comment number 2 is about restudying the shutters.
Yeah, so her motion is for conceptual approval with staff comment number 2 to restudy the shutters and final review by staff. If there's a second, we'll keep it going. If not, we will.
It's more for that front corner, more than just reset the shutters, like reset the system.
So that motion is no longer in play.
Sure.
Okay, then I'll make a motion with staff comment number 2 plus board comment that the prominent front corner first floor be restudied for materiality.
And Laura, would that come back to the board for review, or would it be handled by staff?
I think staff can handle that after doing our comments. Yes.
Frankie, you have those details. Is there a second to that motion? Not.
And I withdraw my motion.
That motion has died without a second. Fillmore, it's your turn.
Board should make a motion.
I shouldn't.
Technically, we can.
The three of you are very capable.
Okay. I guess to me that it's not such a prominent corner, but I like the texture there, but and they want to put a shower in there because they could move it.
Please leave both directions open porch enclosure aesthetic, but also thinking about like what Aaron had said about that front elevation and the balance of those 4 openings. Similarly on the other street elevation, the way they've got the 4 openings balanced there.
I mean, to me, they would still read because they're filled in with something
Different.
clearly motion. To fill the silence, and I resurrect my motion. Great. Anything transpired over there? Two again.
Your motion was for the corner approval.
Do we send
To completely
material?
rescind it. I mean, I don't disagree with that. The reason I didn't say what your motion is because I'm still a little up in the air as to whether I'll support it. Oh, I'm trying to, actually trying to decide if I support the concept
If there's
of
any
closing
other.
at all.
When you say materiality, what do you mean, like no material is what you'd rather have?
Just that it needs to be restated. Is there another material we could use that might give that appearance of the glass but still give you the privacy? There's so many new materials. I don't know, maybe there's something that would help balance that elevation a little bit more without sacrificing. I understand the floor plan, constraints and privacy and all of that too. So
I think it's just like investigate or consider.
yes.
Okay, I'm gonna make a brand new motion for conceptual approval with staff comment number 2 and a board comment to consider alternate materials for the glazing and fill at the southeast corner, first floor. Final review by staff.
I second that motion.
Frankie, do you have the details of that motion? I don't have the second part of it. Which I mean, I just asked for, well, so I have conceptual approval, staff comment number 2, final review by staff, but I don't have the board comment.
Consider alternate materials
Material of southeast corner.
for infill, for glazing and fill at southeast corner, first floor.
Okay, so I have that written down. Laura, you have seconded that motion. So we'll call for a vote. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Opposed? You're in favor of the motion. Okay. So I hear 3 in favor. Chair will vote with the majority. So the motion passes 4-0.
This stuff was
Next up will be number 18 Church Street. And Eddie, you are allowed back, but you're not. Well, aren't you up? Oh, okay.
Thank you for
Okay. Sorry. Well then, get back there.
Julia thinks I was born in the worst decade.
And so I'll note that Eddie Fava is recused from this application. That is standing room only in the crowd. So Frankie will introduce and then.
Church is requesting conceptual approval for the renovation of a non-historic character. Historic structure is a category 2 in Charlestown, circa 1840 in the Old and Historic District. This is the location on Church Street. Existing site photos. Church Street. And Sanborn map showing the history of the structure. And I will turn it over to the applicant.
All right, Michael Strobel with EECO Architects, and we are representing Stephen and Andrea Strawn, the owners of 18 Church Street. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please, Tracy. So it's worth noting, we are only requesting modifications to the rear carriage house, as shown in the survey there. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. So these are the previous Sanborn maps as shown. There is a single-story structure shown on the Sanborn maps. It's not the same footprint as what we have here, and obviously what we have now is a two-story structure. So we don't have any indication that there's any historic material on the property. And I believe the city noted that it was majorly modified around 1999. Next slide, please. Some photos of the building. It's a lovely building. It is mostly stucco on wood frame. And then we've got a kind of glass greenhouse roof off to the side. And so we are proposing some pretty major modifications to this building. Can you go to the next slide, please? So again, the building sits about between 107 and 108 feet off the public right of way, so it sits pretty far back on the site. It's kind of nestled behind the main house on the site. You can go to the next slide. So you'll see we did block in some landscape stuff that's going to come later with a later design. The only thing that we're requesting is modifications to get to this carriage house. The footprint stays the exact same. The main thing that we're proposing to do is remove the stucco on frame, which we know is an issue in town, and infill those areas with a brick veneer so that we can work with some of the existing framing structure that's there. And the only thing that we would be keeping really as far as exterior cladding are those existing brick piers. You can go to the next slide, please. So again, just showing the existing and proposed first floor plan. As I mentioned before, footprint stays the exact same. The only thing that's really changing on the outside is cladding and a couple of interior walls. Next slide, please. Second floor, same thing. You go to the next slide, please. Okay, elevations. So again, it's got these post-2000 insulated wood garage doors that we are proposing to replace. We are proposing insulated glass. It is 108 feet or so off of the front property line. And then you can see it kind of nestles in behind the piazzas of the main house. So you'll see a couple of lines there on that west elevation, just showing the rear portion of the main house as well as where the piazzas. Next slide, please. And just showing the side and the rear. That's it. We did reach out to the Historic Charleston Foundation Preservation Society. They voiced their concerns. And we also gave letters to all the adjacent neighbors earlier in the week and have heard any concerns from them as well. Any questions?
From the drawings, it looks as though there's minimal overhang, roof overhang. And you're going to add a full veneer to the framing?
Yes.
So you're going to adjust the overhangs to, is there enough existing overhang to accommodate the veneer? Because my instinct is the brick veneer is going to extend substantially further than the stucco on frame.
Sure. So if you actually don't mind going back to the photo sheet, there's some parapet walls that stick out on either side. And so the existing roof overhang comes out to the edge of those parapet walls, which is essentially where the brick veneer would come out to as well. And you'll also notice in the photo on the bottom right, you have these parapet walls that come up as a gable, but then the roof itself has been clipped off, very strange way. And so we are proposing to actually reframe that roof to more of a traditional gable shape. So the entire roof would actually.
Any other questions? We're keeping one little section of the stucco on frame. Am I seeing that right?
Correct, we are.
Any other questions?
Yeah. What material, do you know what material for the standing seam, the new standing seam roof?
We have not specified, it could be a hand crimp if necessary, again, it's 108 feet off the street, so if that was a requirement by DAR, good.
Aaron, would you like to make public comment? Okay. And we have no public comment submitted, so Frankie, if you would provide your recommendation.
That observation, we found that the current alterations to the carriage house were completed in Community 9. We thought the new front door was very tall and sort of awkwardly proportioned. We just recommended reducing the height to match the other door, maybe adding a transom window or some sort of detailing like that to emphasize the entry. But we are recommending conceptual approval with staff comment and a final review by staff. I will note I'm somewhat sad to see the what I'm calling flattened onion dome go away.
What is up with that?
Any reply to that, or are you good?
Only thing I would say, if you go back to, I think it's sheet 20, sheet 2. We're happy to restudy that entry if needed. It is a double height space, which is why it's taller than a shorter door. I'm not sure that it would be very visible from public transport. Again, have to restudy.
Thank you. All right, so we can move on to board discussion.
I wrote down, looks good to me, current conditions are bizarre.
Flattened onion dome.
My only thought was that the doors, the arch doors, almost felt a little too short. It's like we have shortest at the biggest area, and then they got a little bit taller in the bathroom, and then a lot taller. I don't know, something just didn't feel quite right there, but maybe constrained by ceiling heights and all. And maybe it's, yeah, it was just, I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about, something didn't feel quite right.
There's a lot of space between that and the windowsill above.
Yeah, but then like you said, I mean, the stuff on the left isn't going to be that visible from the public right away.
Well, the applicant, do you think there's an option to raise the header of those large openings?
I believe we have an 8-foot ceiling. I believe that the center of the arches are at 7. So depending on header height, it's going to get pretty tight. We could look at how much higher we could get them, but I don't think it's going to be much.
Any other questions? Then we can move on to discussion.
Okay. I'll just make a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments about the door and the board comment to study raising the height of the arched openings. And final review by staff.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So Julia's made the motion, Fillmore second. Frankie, do you have that written down? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes with the majority, and motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our final, no, I'm sorry, we have two left. Our next to last will be 24 Humphrey Court. Get the other pile.
I've got,
I had a whole pile. I guess you got them.
we'll find them. 24 Humphrey Court is requesting final approval for new construction of single-family affordable housing. This previously received final approval June 11th, 2020, which has expired. It was not surveyed in Canberra, Elliotboro. Will be new in the Old City District. I do not have my next slide, but I apologize. Crazy.
Good evening, board members. Here in the year with Julia Martin Architects. Final approval for this new single-family residence that will be an affordable house. It's being constructed by the Episcopal Diocese Community Housing Authority. As Frankie mentioned, POC was their back project in the time before. It received approval in June of 2020, but due to the pandemic's effect on material prices, the house has not yet been constructed. And unfortunately, that approval lapsed 3 months ago. So rather than being drafted for an extension, we're obliged to ask you to approve it. Since we have two people that didn't get the benefit of my wonderful speech the last time, I'm going to very quickly give you the basics. I'm going to go to the next slide. That is the context. Next slide. Porter's Court, Humphrey Court. I think everybody's pretty much familiar with it. This is survey of our lot, which we're dealing with two fairly restricted utility company easements at the front and the rear, so that's impacting the siting and overall plans somewhat. We're in an X zone here, so height is not a concern. Next slide. All right. This is going to be slightly out of order. That's probably on us, but that's right. All right, so site plan. Let me jump ahead. So again, relatively simple layout, but we're setting back from the street in a slightly unique way. We are able to achieve parking on this lot, ample green space. Given all the parameters of the lot. All right, so this is the first and second floor plans, fairly modest 2-bedroom house, plenty of pretty simple, interesting massing on the exteriors and what we're going for here. Gable roof with architectural shingles, and there's kind of a minor volume there on your left that's low slope membrane. Next slide. The exterior here, we have a 2-story, 3-bay main volume with a secondary minor volume on the right and west side, excuse me. It's not too dissimilar from a traditional single house form, but by pulling the entry a little further back, we're able to break down the mass and also really read as something a little bit more contemporary. Materials are a 4-inch exposure cementitious slab siding, 2/2 aluminum clad, STL windows, the standard grills on the exterior, space of guard in between. We have a relatively minimal foundation with traditional brick-coat smooth stucco finish. And in terms of colors, which you don't see here, but I think probably was on our title sheet there, we're kind of imagining a light base color on a siding with the main volume and then a single strong trim color that would occur at the trim, the fascia, the window sashes, and then the minor volume siding. I just have a nice contrast throughout. Next slide. These are the proposed streetscapes, which you and a lot of variety in this area, but we're certainly keeping with the other two-story buildings, which are really short down the street. The last slides are our details at the end, which I won't go through, but if you have any questions.
Anyone? I will verify. It looks like it did when I saw it before. Right, so no questions. Frankie, would you like, or, well, no, we have no public here to give comment.
Since this project was previously approved by the board, and its approval has merely expired with that extension, we have no additional comments. Are recommending final approval with color to be reviewed with staff.
Thank you. Aaron, do you have any feedback on that? Thank you. So we will move into board discussion.
I think it's a handsome little structure. First time I've seen it with all constraints, so well done.
I still like it.
Just make a motion for final approval with the staff comment.
Yeah, color to be reviewed by staff.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, sorry. Eddie, you made the motion?
Yes.
All right. Fillmore seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes with the other three, and 4-0 in favor. The motion passes. Don't let it expire again. Our final item, which I'm sorry, it was not on my Dropbox thing.
Oh, sorry. I had left it off the agenda and I was corrected.
Is 43 Hazel Street. And Frankie will first introduce the project and then we'll hear from the applicant.
43 Hazel is requesting conceptual approval for solar panels. It is a category 3 in Ansenborough, circa 1840 in the old historic district. I don't know why we don't have context slides. I'm so sorry, Erin.
That's all right. All right. Erin here with Julia Martin Architects. We're here tonight requesting installation of a solar array at 43 Hazel Street. Board reviewed some minor exterior renovations to this property just a few months ago. That construction is just getting underway, and recently the owner approached us and asked about the idea of incorporating solar panels into this project. And we're excited to say that we think this is actually an excellent opportunity to use that technology for a historic structure. I've got a few site photos here that highlight several of the conditions that make this property uniquely suited for a solar array that complies with the board's recently developed policy statement. As you may recall, this home has a fairly extensive footprint thanks to a series of rear additions and dependencies, and those structures are behind this 2.5-story mass. So as you can see here in the bottom left, there's some photos that highlight that dependency structures at the rear are all low slope, flat roofs, most located behind parapets. So as encouraged by the policy statement, we are taking full advantage of those roofs to house the majority of the panels. In order to make the installation viable, we're also asking to install several panels on the main roof and secondary roof of the primary structure. And we've studied the view corridors around this property extensively and feel like it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to see portions of the east side of the gable roofs shown here in the bottom left or right. So this area is clad in asphalt shingle, which is in need of replacing as well. There will be no historic features that are altered or obscured in utilizing these locations. Next slide, please. Here's just some aerial views for those of you who didn't look at this last time. So here is the main 2.5-story mass. This is a 1980s hyphen, and then 2 brick structures to the back that are all connected to one another. So the 3 roofs, as I said, that are showing up here in white are the flat, low slope roofs, and then these 2 areas here are the gray asphalt shingle that led to the glass Next slide, please. Here is the proposed roof plan showing the panel layout, as well as a few specifics on the system performance, which essentially boils down to this installation having the ability to generate 92% of the energy to this property, with little to no visibility from the street and no impact on historic fabric. Next slide. This slide just has a few more details about this specified panel. It's really a low profile. It will only project a total of 4 inches above the roof. And I've got James Reed with Boss Energy here with me, as well, if you have any technical questions about the system. That's all I have. If you have any questions, please.
So the panels on the low slope roofs, the flat roofs of the additions, they will have the same projection, just 4 inches.
That's a maximum too. It's probably 3.5, but all 4 per maximum.
So they're flat. There's no slope on those.
Any other questions?
Aaron, you mentioned that the shingle roof was a need replacement. Are they going to be doing that before they do this?
Yeah, that's already part of.
Oh, part of what was already done. Okay, I missed it. Thank you.
Yeah, Eddie, we saw this about a month ago.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
And I presume there is no public comment. And we will ask Frankie for her position.
Staff would just encourage solar panels not to be installed on the roof of the original structure, but that being said, we don't think they would be visible if they are put there. So we're recommending final approval.
Aaron, any comment?
I would just say it took us a while to actually figure out what was on the main roof, like whether that was architectural shingle or slate or whatever, because it is so difficult to see that area, particularly the area.
Thank you. So public forum is closed, and we'll move on to board discussion.
I think this is an exciting opportunity where I don't see how you could possibly see it from the pictures that were provided. I didn't try to there, but I think it's a pretty cool opportunity.
I think if you're going to put solar panels on a historic structure, this is probably about as nice a way as an arrangement as you can get. It's a good opportunity because you've got all the ancillary structures of this nice flat roofs.
I would add that after a lot of discussion on behalf of the board, a lot of denials, a lot of deferrals, and very few approvals, and trying to work carefully on a solar policy, I think the fact that this is not a historic roof material, this project, I think, lends itself well to proving how it can work. I mean, I myself have studied it at home, but my roof can't, we can't figure out how to clip it to a historic roof, and so it kind of went nowhere. But the fact that you have this material really, I think, should allow this to move forward. Yes, sir.
Just want to mention one thing about Boss Energy. We are a local installer started here in Charleston. We do tricky projects all the time. We would handle this with care and be honored to be able to do a project like this in a historical area. So it will be in good hands. We're in a really nice little company, small company. I encourage you to look us up and check us out. But my company's been doing solar for many years. We've been in Charleston for operating since 2015. So if there was ever a good company to do a project like this, it would be Boss.
Any other discussion? Eddie, did you have anything?
I have one quick question. The flat roofs, what's the closure system on them? I mean, are they? They're just, yeah, they're like
TPO, it's called.
Yeah, they're TPO.
Okay, maybe I'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion for final approval.
We have a second. So Fillmore has made a motion for final approval as submitted. Laura has seconded. All in favor? Aye. Chair votes with the other three, 4-0 in favor of the motion. Request passes. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Thank you.
Second, sort of on this. All in favor? Meeting is officially adjourned and we can discontinue broadcast.
Thank you.
Did Julia leave or